When my son-in-law Trevor handed me his phone under the dinner table, my hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped it. The text message on the screen made my blood run cold. "Dad, check your retirement account. Right now. Then pretend you're having chest pains and leave. I'll explain in the car. Trust me." I looked up at him across the table, my daughter, Melissa's husband of 8 years, and he gave me the slightest nod while continuing his conversation with my son, Brandon, about the upcoming Canucks game. The normalcy of it all felt surreal. We were sitting in the dining room of my North Vancouver home on a rainy October evening in 2023, surrounded by family for what I thought was just another Sunday dinner. Brandon had invited some business associates to discuss a new real estate development project, and the house was full of laughter, and the smell of my late wife Catherine's famous pot roast recipe that I'd been trying to perfect for the past 3 years. Catherine had passed away from cancer in 2020, and these family dinners had become sacred to me. They were the only times the house felt alive again, the only times I didn't wander these halls like a ghost myself. I excused myself to the bathroom, my heart hammering against my ribs. In the privacy of the guest washroom, I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and logged into my online banking. The Royal Bank app took forever to load, each second stretching into eternity. When the screen finally refreshed, I had to grip the edge of the sink to keep from falling. My retirement savings account, the one Catherine and I had spent 37 years building, showed a balance of $47,000. Last month, it had been $430,000. I checked the transaction history with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Transfer after transfer, all authorized from my account, all going to an account I didn't recognize. The dates went back 6 months. Nearly $400,000 gone. Transferred in careful increments, never quite large enough to trigger an automatic bank alert, but systematic enough to drain everything I had worked my entire life to save. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to think. Brandon had convinced me to give him signing authority on my accounts last spring. "Dad, you're 68 years old," he'd said with that concerned voice that made me feel ancient and helpless. "What if something happens to you? What if you have a stroke like Uncle Raymond? Someone needs to be able to access your accounts to pay your bills, handle your affairs. I'm the executor of your will anyway. This just makes things easier." It had made sense at the time. Brandon was my only son, a successful commercial real estate developer, married with 2 beautiful kids. Melissa had married Trevor, a software engineer at Electronic Arts, and they'd just bought a house in Surrey. Both my children were doing well. Why wouldn't I trust my son with my financial security? I thought about Catherine, about how she'd always been the cautious one in our marriage. "Richard," she'd say in that gentle but firm voice of hers, "just because someone is family doesn't mean you should give them complete access to your life savings." I'd always thought she was being paranoid, overly protective. Now I realized she'd been protecting me from my own blind trust. I gripped the bathroom counter, fighting back the wave of nausea. My son, my own son, had stolen my life savings. But why was Trevor warning me? He was married to Melissa, Brandon's sister. What did he know that I didn't? I forced myself to take a deep breath and return to the dinner table. Brandon was holding court at the head of the table, my place, the place I'd sat for 43 years in this house, the place Catherine had always served my plate first. When had I let him take that seat? "Dad, there you are," Brandon said with that broad smile that had charmed teachers, girlfriends, and apparently investors throughout his life. "I was just telling David and Marcus about the Lonsdale development. It's going to be the largest mixed-use project in North Van history. 12 stories, retail on the ground floor, luxury condos above. We're talking a $50 million project." The 3 men at the table, David Chen, Marcus Rodriguez, and someone else I didn't recognize, nodded appreciatively. These were Brandon's investors, I realized. This whole dinner was a business meeting disguised as a family gathering. "That's wonderful, son," I managed to say, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears. "Though I'm afraid I'm not feeling very well. I think I might need to." "Dad, sit down. Have some more wine," Brandon interrupted smoothly, already pouring from the bottle of Okanagan Cabernet I'd opened earlier. "You've barely eaten anything. You need to keep your strength up." There was something in his tone, something just a shade too insistent, that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Trevor caught my eye from across the table and gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Not yet," his expression said. "Wait." So I sat. I smiled. I made small talk with Brandon's investors while my world crumbled around me. Melissa chatted about her nursing shifts at Vancouver General Hospital, completely oblivious to the silent terror unfolding at her father's dinner table. Trevor's two kids, Emma and Jack, 9 and 7 years old, played with their food and asked if they could be excused to play video games. Actually, Trevor said, standing up and checking his watch, we should probably get going. Emma has hockey practice early tomorrow morning, and it's already past 8. Oh, come on, Melissa protested. We just got here. Emma's practice isn't until 10. We have plenty of time. I told Coach Daniels we'd help set up the equipment early, Trevor said firmly, giving his wife a look I couldn't quite read. Besides, I think your dad isn't feeling well. Richard, why don't I give you a ride to the walk-in clinic? You look pale. Brandon's smile tightened, just a fraction. Dad's fine, aren't you, Dad? Just tired. He can lie down upstairs if he needs to rest. In fact, that might be better. We have some paperwork to go over, some documents that need signatures for the Lonsdale project. Dad's actually one of our investors. I stared at my son. I am? Of course. Don't you remember? We talked about this last month. You invested $300,000 in the project. Your retirement savings were just sitting there earning nothing in that old savings account. I put them to work for you. You're going to triple your money when this development goes through. The lie was so smooth, so perfectly delivered, that for a moment I almost believed it myself. Almost convinced myself that I had agreed to this, that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. But I hadn't. I would never have invested everything Catherine and I had saved without talking to my financial advisor, without reading every page of documentation. I'd spent 40 years as an accountant with Revenue Canada. I knew better. I think, I said carefully, that Trevor's right. I should probably get checked out. I'm feeling some tightness in my chest. That got everyone's attention. Melissa was on her feet immediately, her nurse training kicking in. Dad, are you having chest pains? When did they start? Are they radiating down your arm? I'm sure it's nothing, I said. But I made my voice weak enough to be convincing. Probably just indigestion. But maybe I should get it checked, just to be safe. I'll drive you, Brandon said, standing up quickly. Too quickly. Everyone else stay. Enjoy dessert. Dad and I will just run to the Lionsgate Hospital emergency room. We'll be back in a couple of hours. I'll take him, Trevor said, his voice firm. You have your investors here. Finish your meeting. Richard, let's go. For a moment, I thought Brandon might argue. I saw something flash across his face, something cold and calculating that I'd never seen in my son's expression before. Then his professional mask slipped back into place. Of course, he said smoothly. Take care of him, Trevor. Dad, I'll call you later to check in. Trevor had me out the door before anyone could say anything else. Melissa was gathering the kids, calling out something about meeting us at the hospital. But Trevor was already pulling out of the driveway in his Tesla, the rain hammering against the windshield. We drove in silence for 3 blocks. Then Trevor pulled into the parking lot of the Lonsdale Quay and turned off the ignition. What you saw in your bank account, he said without preamble, that's not even half of it. I turned to look at my son-in-law. Trevor was 35, quiet and methodical, the kind of person who thought through every word before speaking. He and Melissa had met at UBC, and I'd always liked him, though I'd never felt like I really knew him. He kept to himself, spent most family gatherings listening rather than talking. Now he pulled out his laptop from the back seat and opened it, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I work in cybersecurity, he said. Part of my job is identifying fraud patterns, unusual digital behavior. About 3 months ago, I noticed something odd. Melissa mentioned that Brandon had asked her to witness some documents, transfer papers for your investment accounts. She thought it was routine estate planning, but the timing seemed off to me. Why would Brandon suddenly need to move all your assets around? He turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a spreadsheet, meticulously detailed, showing every transaction from my accounts over the past 6 months. He's been siphoning money since April, Trevor said. Small amounts at first, then larger chunks. The Lonsdale development project? It's real, but it's failing. Brandon took deposits from investors, used the money to pay off debts from his last failed project in Richmond. That one collapsed because he'd used investor funds as personal loans. He's been running a Ponzi scheme for at least 3 years. I stared at the numbers on the screen. my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. How do you know all this? Because I started digging, Trevor said quietly. I hacked into his company's financial records. I know that's illegal, and I know it means this evidence probably can't be used in court, but I had to know what I was dealing with before I said anything to you or Melissa. Richard, your son isn't just stealing from you. He's stolen from at least 6 other investors, including 2 of his so-called friends back there at dinner. David Chen invested his entire life savings, $800,000. Marcus Rodriguez took out a second mortgage on his house to invest $500,000. Dear God, I whispered. It gets worse, Trevor continued, his voice grim. I found these in Brandon's digital files. He pulled up a document, and my vision went blurry with rage and disbelief. It was a power of attorney document, granting Brandon full legal authority over all my affairs. But it wasn't the one I'd signed. This one went much further, giving him the right to sell my property, access my pension, make medical decisions on my behalf. That's not the document I signed, I said. I know. He forged this one. And there's more. Trevor pulled up another file, a psychiatric evaluation, supposedly from Dr. Jennifer Morrison at Vancouver General Hospital, declaring that I was suffering from advancing dementia and was no longer capable of managing my own affairs. I've never even met Dr. Morrison, I said, my voice shaking. The doctor is real, but the report is forged, Trevor said. Brandon's been building a case to have you declared mentally incompetent. Once that goes through, he gets complete control of your assets, including this house. The rain drummed on the roof of the car. In the distance, I could see the lights of the C-bus crossing the inlet, ferries full of people heading home to North Van from downtown, people whose sons hadn't betrayed them, whose lives weren't falling apart. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Trevor was quiet for a long moment. Because I didn't want to believe it, he finally said. Brandon is Melissa's brother, my kid's uncle. I kept thinking there had to be some other explanation, some way this all made sense. But tonight, when I saw those investors at your house, I knew he was going to try to get more money from you. He probably has documents in his briefcase right now for you to sign, probably under the guise of the Lonsdale Project, but actually giving him access to your home equity line of credit, your pension, whatever you have left. What do I do? I asked, and hated how helpless I sounded. We call the RCMP, Trevor said. I've already been in contact with their financial crimes division. Constable Sarah Mitchell, I sent her all the evidence I'd gathered, and she's been building a case. But they need you to file a formal complaint. They need you to go on record. He's my son, I said, and my voice broke on the words. I know, Trevor said gently. Richard, I know this is impossible, but if you don't stop him now, he's going to take everything. Your house, your pension, your dignity, and he's going to keep doing this to other people. How many more families is he going to destroy? I thought about Catherine, about how hard we'd worked for everything we had. I thought about the other investors, about David Chen's life savings, about Marcus Rodriguez's house. I thought about my grandchildren, Emma and Jack, and what kind of man their uncle would become if no one stopped him. Okay, I said, call your RCMP contact. Let's do this. Trevor made the call. Constable Mitchell said she could meet us at the RCMP detachment in North Vancouver in 30 minutes. Trevor called Melissa and told her I'd had a panic attack, that we were at the hospital, and that she should stay home with the kids. I hated lying to my daughter, but Trevor was right, we couldn't risk her warning Brandon, even accidentally. The RCMP detachment was quiet on a Sunday night. Constable Mitchell was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and the kind of calm competence that came from years of dealing with terrible situations. Mr. Thornton, she said, shaking my hand, I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. Trevor has been very thorough in documenting this case. But I need you to walk me through everything from your perspective. Start at the beginning. So I did. I told her about giving Brandon signing authority on my accounts, about the forged documents Trevor had found, about the money missing from my retirement savings, about the investors at my house tonight. The problem, Constable Mitchell said carefully, is that your son technically had legal authority to make those transfers. You gave him signing privileges. A good lawyer could argue that he was making investment decisions on your behalf. But I didn't authorize those specific transfers, I protested. I know, but without concrete proof that you explicitly refused those transactions, without evidence that he forged your signature or acted against your explicit instructions, this becomes a very difficult case to prosecute. It's your word against his, and he's likely covered his tracks well. I felt the last bit of hope drain out of me. So he gets away with it? I didn't say that, Constable Mitchell said with a small smile. What we need is for him to incriminate himself, to make him think he's gotten away with it, and then catch him in the act of either stealing more money or falsifying more documents. Trevor leaned forward. You want Richard to wear a wire? Not exactly, the constable said, but something close. Mr. Thornton, are you willing to go back to your house tonight? To act like nothing has happened? If Brandon is planning to get you to sign more documents tonight, I want to catch him doing it. My stomach churned at the thought of going back, of sitting across from my son and pretending I didn't know what he'd done. But I nodded. I can do it, I said. What do I need to do? Just get him talking, Constable Mitchell said. Ask questions about the investments. Act confused about the paperwork. If he pressures you to sign something, read it carefully and ask questions. If he's forged your signature on other documents, if he's lied about where the money is going, we need him to do it again, where we can document it. She fitted me with a small recording device, barely bigger than a button, that attached to the inside of my shirt collar. This is completely legal in Canada, she said. You're allowed to record conversations you're part of. Everything he says will be admissible in court. Trevor drove me back to my house. The rain had let up, and the streets of North Vancouver gleamed under the streetlights. It was nearly 10 o'clock, and I wondered if Brandon's investors were still there, or if they'd left, oblivious to the fact that their money was gone. You don't have to do this, Trevor said as we pulled up outside my house. Yes, I do, I said. For Catherine, for those other investors, for Emma and Jack, so they grow up knowing that actions have consequences. The house was quieter when I walked back in. The investors had left, but Brandon was still there, sitting at the dining room table with a briefcase open in front of him. He looked up when I entered, and his face broke into a relieved smile. Dad, thank God. Trevor texted Melissa that you were okay. Just stress. I've been so worried. Come sit down. We should talk. I sat across from my son. This man I'd raised, whose diapers I'd changed, whose little league games I'd never missed, whose university tuition I'd paid without complaint. This stranger wearing my son's face. I'm sorry about tonight, I said. I don't know what came over me. Don't apologize, Brandon said smoothly. You've been under a lot of stress since Mom died. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. I've been thinking that this house is too much for you to manage alone. All these stairs, the maintenance, the yard work. What if you fell? What if something happened, and no one was here to help you? I manage fine, I said carefully. I know you think you do, Brandon said, his voice dripping with concern. But Dad, you're not getting any younger. I found you confused the other day, remember? You couldn't remember where you'd parked your car at the grocery store. And last month, you called me 3 times asking the same question about your medication. None of that had happened. But I saw what he was doing, building a narrative, creating a history of mental decline that didn't exist. Maybe you're right, I said slowly. I have been feeling forgetful lately. Brandon's eyes lit up. Exactly. Which is why I think we should talk about moving you into a care facility. Just a nice retirement community. Nothing drastic. Somewhere with staff who can check on you. Make sure you're taking your medications. Help with meals. You'd have your own apartment, your own space. But with support. What about this house? Well, we'd have to sell it to pay for the care facility, Brandon said. But don't worry about that. I've already talked to a realtor. In this market, we could easily get $2 million for this property. After paying off the mortgage and the line of credit. What line of credit? I interrupted. Brandon didn't even blink. The one we took out last year. Remember? For the roof repairs and the new furnace. $200,000. We talked about this. We hadn't. But I understood now he was planning to forge documents showing I'd taken out a home equity line of credit, then pocket that money too. I don't remember that, I said carefully. See, that's exactly what I'm talking about, Brandon said, his voice full of false sympathy. These memory gaps are getting worse, which is why I need you to sign some papers tonight. Just protective measures, legal documents, to make sure I can take care of you properly. He pulled out a stack of documents from his briefcase and slid them across the table. What are these? I asked, picking up the first one. Just standard estate planning stuff, Brandon said. Power of attorney updates, healthcare directives, property transfer authorizations. Sign here, here, and here. I've marked all the spots with sticky tabs. I forced myself to read the first document slowly. It was a general power of attorney, granting Brandon complete control over all my financial and legal affairs, effective immediately. The second was a property transfer agreement, signing my house over to Brandon for estate planning purposes. The third was a living will, naming Brandon as my healthcare proxy with the authority to make all medical decisions, including end-of-life care. If I signed these documents, I would have nothing. No money, no home, no control over my own life or death. Brandon, I said slowly, I want to understand something. Where exactly is my retirement money right now? In the Lonsdale development. Like I told you, he said impatiently. Dad, we've been over this. You're going to make a fortune when the project completes. How much did I invest? $300,000, like we discussed. And when will I see returns on that investment? 18 months, maybe 2 years. These things take time. Now come on, Dad. Sign the papers. I have an early meeting tomorrow. What if I want to withdraw my investment? I asked. What if I need that money now? Brandon's smile tightened. You can't. It's tied up in the project. That's how investments work. But it's my money, I said. Shouldn't I be able to access my own money? Dad, you're not thinking clearly, Brandon said, his tone shifting from sympathetic to irritated. This is exactly why we need to get these papers signed. You're not capable of making these kinds of financial decisions anymore. Trust me, I'm doing this for your own good. My own good? I repeated. Or yours? Brandon went very still. What's that supposed to mean? It means I checked my bank account tonight, I said, and I couldn't keep the tremor out of my voice. It means I saw that my retirement savings are gone. All of it. Not $300,000 invested in some development project, but $383,000 transferred out in increments over the past 6 months. It means I know there is no investment, Brandon. There never was. My son stared at me for a long moment. Then his expression changed, hardened into something I'd never seen before. Something cold. Who told you that? He asked quietly. Trevor? Does it matter? That smug son of a Brandon stopped himself, took a breath. Dad, listen to me. Trevor doesn't understand business. Those transfers were legitimate investment transactions. Yes, I moved money around, but it was all for the project. Sometimes you have to shift funds between accounts, pay contractors, secure permits. It's all legal. It's all documented. Then show me the documentation, I said. I don't have to show you anything, Brandon snapped. I have signing authority on your accounts. Every transaction I made was within my legal rights. If you have a problem with that, you shouldn't have given me access in the first place. You're right, I said quietly. I shouldn't have trusted you. Brandon laughed, but there was no humor in it. Trust? You want to talk about trust? Dad, I've been carrying this family financially for years. Who do you think paid for Mom's cancer treatments when your insurance maxed out? Who do you think has been covering the property taxes on this house? You think your government pension and retirement savings were enough? I've put hundreds of thousands of dollars into keeping you comfortable. And now you're going to accuse me of stealing? I never asked you to pay for any of that, I said. No, you just accepted it gratefully and never asked questions, Brandon shot back. You were happy enough to let me handle everything when it was convenient. But now that I need something from you, now that I need you to be a team player and help with this investment project, suddenly you don't trust me? There is no investment project, I said. Is there, Brandon? You've been stealing from your investors. David Chen, Marcus Rodriguez, probably others. You're running a Ponzi scheme, using new investor money to pay off old debts. And now you're trying to steal my house, too. Brandon stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You don't know what you're talking about. You're a confused old man who can't even remember where he parked his car. No one is going to believe you. The RCMP will, I said. Brandon froze. What? I've already filed a complaint, I said. And I stood up too, facing my son. They know everything. The forged documents, the fake psychiatric evaluation, the money you stole. They have records of every transaction. It's over, Brandon. For a moment, my son just stared at me. Then he moved fast, crossing around the table, and I genuinely couldn't tell if he was going to hit me or just try to intimidate me into backing down. He didn't get the chance to do either. The front door burst open, and Constable Mitchell came through with 2 other officers behind her. "Brandon Thornton, we have a warrant for your arrest. Put your hands where we can see them." Brandon spun around, his face going white. "What? This is insane. Dad, tell them this is a misunderstanding." But I didn't say anything. I just stood there, my legs shaking, while the police officers read my son his rights and snapped handcuffs around his wrists. "Richard Thornton, theft over $5,000, fraud over $5,000, forgery, and attempted fraud," Constable Mitchell said. "You have the right to retain and instruct counsel without delay." Brandon was shouting now, about lawyers, about wrongful arrest, about how I'd regret this. But his voice seemed to come from very far away. I sank back into my chair and put my head in my hands. Trevor appeared beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. "I just had my own son arrested," I whispered. "You stopped a criminal from victimizing more people," Trevor corrected gently. "There's a difference." Melissa arrived 20 minutes later, after the police had taken Brandon away. She stood in the doorway of my dining room, her face pale, mascara running from tears. "Dad, what happened?" "The police just arrested Brandon. They won't tell me anything. What's going on?" I looked at my daughter, this beautiful woman who'd inherited her mother's compassion and strength, and I didn't know how to tell her that her brother was a thief, that the man she'd looked up to her entire life had been stealing from his own father. Trevor did it for me. Quietly, methodically, he explained everything to Melissa while I sat there, feeling like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. I watched my daughter's face as she processed what her husband was telling her, the disbelief, the denial, the horror, and finally, the devastation. "No," she kept saying. "No, Brandon wouldn't. He couldn't. There has to be some mistake." But there wasn't. Over the next few weeks, as the RCMP investigation continued, the full extent of Brandon's crimes came to light. He'd stolen nearly $2 million from various investors over 3 years. He'd forged documents, created fake companies, falsified financial statements. The Lonsdale development project was real, but it had collapsed months ago when contractors realized they weren't getting paid. Brandon had been using new investor money to pay off old investors, classic Ponzi scheme tactics, while funneling hundreds of thousands to cover his own lifestyle, the luxury car lease, the private school tuition for his kids, the mortgage on his $1 million house in West Vancouver. David Chen had lost everything. Marcus Rodriguez was facing foreclosure. 2 other investors had taken out personal loans based on Brandon's promised returns and were now drowning in debt. The trial took 18 months. Brandon pleaded not guilty, claimed he'd made honest business mistakes, insisted he'd intended to pay everyone back once the development project got new financing. His lawyer painted me as a confused elderly man who'd forgotten giving his son permission to invest his savings. But Trevor's digital evidence was damning. The forged documents, the fake psychiatric evaluation, the systematic transfers that followed patterns of financial abuse, and the recording from that night, Brandon's own words admitting to moving money around, refusing to show documentation, pressuring me to sign away my house. In March of 2025, my son was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and theft. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison. I didn't attend the sentencing. I couldn't. Instead, I sat in my house, the house Catherine and I had bought in 1982, the house where we'd raised our children, the house that was now empty and echoing, and I cried for the son I'd lost. Not to prison, but to greed, to whatever darkness had turned my boy into a man who could look his own father in the eye and steal everything from him. Melissa stopped speaking to me for 6 months. She blamed me for destroying her family, for not giving Brandon a chance to make things right, for not believing that he'd intended to pay the money back. Her marriage to Trevor nearly fell apart under the strain, but Trevor held firm, kept showing her the evidence, kept reminding her that her brother's choices weren't her fault or mine. Eventually, slowly, Melissa came back. We had coffee in March 2025, just after Brandon's sentencing. She cried, and I cried, and we mourned together for the brother and son we thought we knew. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed," she said. "The expensive watches, the new cars every year, the way he always seemed to have money for everything. I thought he was just successful. I thought he'd figured out something I hadn't." "We both missed them," I told her. "I wanted to believe that my son was successful, that I'd raised him right. I didn't want to see that his success was built on stealing from other people. The civil suits came next. David Chen, Marcus Rodriguez, and the other investors sued Brandon for restitution. They also sued me, arguing that as the father, I should have known what my son was doing, should have stopped him sooner. Those suits were eventually dismissed, but the legal fees depleted what little I had left in my accounts. I sold the house in August 2025. I couldn't afford to keep it, and honestly, I couldn't stand to live there anymore. Every room was haunted by memories of that dinner party, of Brandon sitting at my table and lying to my face, of me being so blind and trusting that I'd handed him the keys to my financial destruction. I moved into a small apartment in New Westminster, closer to Melissa and Trevor. I got a part-time job at a tax preparation office during filing season, helping other seniors navigate their returns. The income wasn't much, but it helped supplement my pension and gave me something to do besides sit alone and replay every conversation I'd ever had with Brandon, looking for the moment where I could have stopped this. Trevor helped me establish new bank accounts with fraud monitoring, set up alerts for any unusual transactions, taught me how to protect my digital identity. We never talked about the fact that he'd saved my life by risking his relationship with his wife and his standing in the family, but I think he knew how grateful I was. In October 2025, exactly 2 years after that dinner party, I started volunteering with the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, speaking to seniors about financial abuse within families. I told my story to church groups, community centers, retirement homes. I showed them the warning signs I'd missed, the requests for signing authority, the forged documents, the gaslighting about memory problems. Family financial abuse is real, I would tell them. It happens to smart people, educated people, people who think they're too careful to be victims. I was an accountant for 40 years. I knew how to spot fraud, but I couldn't see it when it was coming from my own son. I told them about the statistics I'd learned. According to the RCMP, financial abuse of elderly Canadians costs victims more than $850 million annually. Often the perpetrator is a family member. Often it goes unreported because victims are ashamed or because they don't want to get their children or grandchildren in trouble. Don't make the decisions I made, I would say. Don't give anyone, even family, complete control over your finances. Keep separate accounts. Review your statements regularly. Ask questions, demand documentation, and most importantly, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Emma and Jack, Trevor and Melissa's kids, are teenagers now. They know their uncle is in prison, though I don't think they understand the full story yet. Sometimes Emma asks me if I ever visit Brandon. I tell her the truth. I haven't. I don't know if I ever will. Brandon writes me letters sometimes. They come to Melissa's house because he doesn't know my new address. She brings them to me unopened, and I put them in a drawer without reading them. I'm not ready to hear his explanations or excuses or apologies. Maybe I never will be. Trevor and I have coffee every Sunday morning, just the two of us, at a little cafe near Waterfront Station. We talk about hockey, about his work, about the kids. We never talk about Brandon. But I think he knows that those Sunday mornings, those quiet conversations over coffee and bagels, are the thing that keeps me going. That reminds me that not everyone in the world is out to betray the people who trust them. The money is gone, most of it. The court ordered Brandon to pay restitution, but he has nothing. His assets were seized to pay back victims, but there wasn't enough to cover everyone's losses. I got back about $80,000, roughly 20% of what was stolen. David Chen got even less. Marcus Rodriguez lost his house. But I still have my apartment, my part-time job, my pension. I still have Melissa, who calls me every day just to check in. I still have Trevor, who proved that family isn't always about blood, but about who shows up for you when your world is falling apart. I still have Emma and Jack, who spend every other weekend with their grandpa Rick, teaching me about Minecraft and TikTok and all the things that make me feel ancient, but also connected to a future that's bigger than my mistakes. And I have Catherine's memory. I visit her grave every month, bring her favorite flowers, white roses, and tell her she was right. She was always right. You tried to warn me, I tell her. You tried to make me see that being a good father doesn't mean giving your children everything they want, including your trust when they haven't earned it. I think about that dinner party sometimes, about Trevor slipping me his phone under the table, about that moment when I had to choose between my comfort and the truth. I think about how easy it would have been to pretend I hadn't seen the missing money, to believe Brandon's lies, to sign those documents, and let him steal everything rather than face the reality that my son had become someone I didn't recognize. And I'm grateful that Trevor was brave enough to speak up, grateful that I was brave enough to listen, grateful that I called the RCMP instead of trying to handle it within the family like Brandon's lawyer suggested, like part of me wanted to do. Because the truth is, protecting Brandon would have meant destroying everyone else. It would have meant letting David Chen and Marcus Rodriguez and all those other investors lose everything. It would have meant teaching Emma and Jack that family loyalty means covering up crimes. It would have meant betraying everything Catherine and I had tried to teach our children about integrity and accountability. Some people have asked me if I regret turning in my own son. The answer is complicated. I regret that it was necessary. I regret the circumstances that led to it. I regret not seeing who Brandon had become sooner, not intervening before he'd hurt so many people. But do I regret stopping him? No, because stopping him was the most loving thing I could have done for his victims, for his children who deserve to know that actions have consequences, and even for Brandon himself. Letting him continue would have destroyed more lives, including eventually his own. Prison might be the thing that finally forces my son to confront what he's become. I don't know if he'll ever take responsibility for what he did, if he'll ever genuinely understand the devastation he caused, but at least he's been stopped. At least no one else will lose their life savings to his schemes. If you're reading this, if you're in a situation where someone you trust, a child, a sibling, a spouse, is asking for access to your accounts, for signing authority, for power of attorney, please be careful. Please ask questions. Please consult with someone outside the family, a lawyer or financial advisor who can review the documents and make sure you're not signing away your security. And if you see signs that someone you love is committing financial abuse, even if they're family, especially if they're family, please speak up. I know it's terrifying. I know you'll be afraid of destroying relationships, of being wrong, of the consequences. But staying silent means becoming complicit in the harm they're causing. Trevor could have stayed quiet. He could have decided it wasn't his place to get involved, that my relationship with Brandon was none of his business. But he spoke up, even knowing it might cost him his marriage, even knowing Melissa might never forgive him. That's what real family does. Real family protects you from harm, even when the harm is coming from within the family itself. It's been over 2 years since that October night. I'm 70 years old now. My life is smaller than it used to be, quieter, lonelier. But it's mine. No one is stealing from me. No one is forging my signature or trying to have me declared incompetent. I control my own accounts, make my own decisions, and live with the consequences of my choices. And every Sunday morning, I sit across from Trevor at that cafe near Waterfront Station, and I watch him doctor his coffee with exactly 2 creams and 1 sugar. And I thank God that when my world was falling apart, when my own blood was betraying me, someone had the courage to hand me his phone under the dinner table and tell me to check my bank account. Sometimes the people who save your life aren't the ones you expect. Sometimes family isn't about who shares your DNA. Sometimes it's about who's willing to tell you the truth, even when the truth will break your heart. That night, Trevor told me the truth. And yes, it broke my heart. But it also saved my life. And that's worth more than all the money in the world.